Here are AyinBase 17. 3 lines from the top. The line begins with bevchinat atzmi, which we dissected yesterday. The meaning bevchinat atzmi. That even though we're talking about his pashtus ho'ir is metaphorically like the name being addressed, being used. The name is being applied to other objects. Nonetheless, it has the quality of oir atzmi, of an oir that represents an atzmi. Now we go further. V'gam bevchinat ha'oir, and even the aspect of the oir, k'moi shehu li'achar ha'tzimtzum, the oir as it is after the tzimtzum. Harehu gam kein bevchinat tzurah atzmis. It retains this quality that the oir, even after the tzimtzum, is still bevchinat tzurah atzmis, representing the union of a tzurah atzmis. Sharein is boiliyil. For since we have explained earlier, tzimtzum ein nehefse gomur legabe ho'er. That the tzimtzum does not represent a hefse gomur, a complete break in the oir. The oil itself is essentially something that is drawn from the oil itself that is before the tzimtzum, even though it comes through the tzimtzum. Even though although that the oil is being drawn and funneled through the tzimtzum. Where, because of the fact that it goes through the tzimtzum, the oil has a certain type of transformation, and it becomes it becomes in proximity. It can relate to worlds. U'k'meishin is boiliyil, and as we already discussed earlier. Mekol mokoim, yet still, harei hu nimshach mehoir insof shelifnei hatzimtzum. It remains, the essential truth of the oil remains that it is nimshach, that it is drawn from the oil insof shelifnei hatzimtzum, the insof before the tzimtzum. That is before the tzimtzum. V'noigeya v'dobuk boy, and it is it touches, and it is not only touching, but in Dovuk it cleaves to the oil of Shelifnei Tzimtzum. So this principle that the oil is nimshach to the tzimtzum, and because it's nimshach to the tzimtzum, there is some kind of an effect, a transformation in the oil, that thus the oil can relate to worlds. Nase be'erech oilams. It is in proximity to worlds. It can understand worlds, and worlds can relate to this oil. as we already discussed. Despite that, it retains the essential truth of this oil, that it is nimshach from the oil social lifnei tzimtzum, and it is actually dovok, it retains its cleavage to the oil social lifnei tzimtzum. So as I said, in this union we already discussed previously and many times before that, the principle that the tzimtzum had affected in the oil and brought the oil down to the state where it can relate to worlds, despite the fact that the oil is still representing the oil lifnei tzimtzum, and it is double to the oil lifnei tzimtzum. If we were to try to identify the change in the effect of the tzimtzum upon the oil, the principal effect of tzimtzum, as we discussed many times, is the tzimtzum provides or effectuates something that's called mokim ponui, a vacant place. And then when the oil is drawn into this vacant place, it becomes like a novel phenomenon. That here there was no oil, and now there is. That phenomenon, that this oil has that status, that it came to fill a vacuum, remains. The sense of not being and being remains because of the fact that there was a tzimtzum. That, in fact, is the inyan that can relate to world. The primary difference between Elokus and world is that world does not have an essential presence, but for the fact that it gets created. And even if after it's created, it has to be continuously maintained, completely created. Because its whole presence is the fact that it is being created. The oil is not created. The oil is nimshach from lifnei tzimtzum. From the oil lifnei tzimtzum is the oil atzmi, that is connected dovu to the oil himself. The tzimtzum brings about a status in the oil that the oil, this same oil, is now nimshach into a place, into a state of tzimtzum, that where it wasn't and now it is. Although that which is nimshach there, the oil, is essentially the oil lifnei tzimtzum. Nevertheless, there is that effect of the fact that it came to a place where there was a tzimtzum that remains in the oil, that now the oil can relate to world. Again, this is not a new concept here, so just mentioning it to explain these words, to refresh our memory. V'im came, and thus, being that the oil retains its connection to the oil of lifnei tzimtzum, because that is in fact the definition of oil, that it is drawn from and representing its source. The oil substance לפני הצמצום. ואם כן, and therefore, הרי הוא מעין בבחינת עצמוס או אינסוף שלפני הצמצום. It retains this quality that it is me'ain. Me'ain means of the similar color, of the similar essence of the atzmi or insof shelifnei tzimtzum. Because what is this oil that comes after the tzimtzum? It is pointing to its connection to the atzmos. Therefore, it is still representative, it still retains that quality of the insof shelifnei tzimtzum.
What's new here? What he's not doesn't waste words. What is he teaching us new here that we haven't heard before?
That after the tzimtzum, the oil after the tzimtzum, essentially is still an oil atzmi, and it's still tzurah atzmis. All right. Behagam, although all right, I want to put it in some kind of a, for us, meaningful sense. In other words, this is not just a technical logic, but there is a resultant effect of this phenomenon in the actual creation in the world itself. And that is I'll use a metaphor. I mentioned recently the phenomenon of the assembly line. The assembly line is some kind of an idea, manufacturing idea. And what is it based on? You want to create a car. The assembly line is based on the principle that you don't create a car. You put together the pieces that are contained in the car. And the car comes out inadvertently. Nobody intends to create a car. Somebody has designed, these are the pieces. And if you put the pieces together in a certain fashion, as they were designed to be, you'll have a car. And the car comes out, I said, almost inadvertently. From a manufacturing perspective, it was a phenomenal invention. It made it extremely efficient, and the cars were rolling out the assembly line 7 minutes on a car. So there are several points in this. As I pointed out, all the people on the assembly line, none of them were creating a car. None of them knew what they were doing in essence. They didn't have a view of the final product. The result of that was that it was a faulty creation. As I pointed out, the Japanese notified, understood what's going on this assembly line. And they said, this is not for us. And instead of creating an assembly line fashion, they established groups. Each group created a car. So everyone involved was actually creating the car. And the assembly line, nobody was creating the car. The car came out inadvertently because of how it is designed, how it was planned. Despite that, there was such breakdown, so to speak, component identity rather than whole identity. In some kind of a subtle fashion, there remained the whole identity, because all the components in the entire assembly line was designed in a fashion to end up in the final product. So, despite the fact that it went through the tzimtzum, which means you broke it down into components, lost sight of the real thing. The components themselves are actually drawn from the real thing. And the overall, so to speak, reality that was taking place, it was to replicate the real thing on a lower level, after the tzimtzum level. But it remained connected to the original thing. If in fact there was a complete severance of connection, then it would never produce anything. And when a car rolled down the assembly line, it was faulty. Nobody would know that it's faulty. What's faulty? It has all the components. What's missing? So this is the principle that the tzimtzum had brought about a recognition of world, because what is world? World, it consists of components. In the world, everything is component identified and a certain structural being. There is nothing in the world. You don't build a table. You build parts of the table and put them together, and the table materializes somehow.
Well, there's a plan. There's a goal.
Shmuel, you understand what I'm saying? So this is the pshat that the oir, this is the intangible element that retains its connection to the original point.
What they call the big picture.
Beyond picture. It's reality. big picture is still component based. This is a completely different thing. That is connected to the source. Like we mentioned the other day, said that a car is a human concept. What inspired the building the car is a human spirit. But the human being has the spirit, and he wants to be able to reach faraway places. This is what inspired the car. Then, after the car was built, people focused on the resultant structure and resultant vehicle tool, and they started using it in complete oblivion to its original spirit. As her identifying the car as a means of transportation, because a human being has to be able to transport himself and to be open to the entire reality, the entire world. They created cars, and as a matter of fact, the most perfect car was intended to go in circles in a racetrack, which is going no place and coming no place, and it's not going anywhere. Just a car that moves. That's a car without a spirit. That is a complete severance from its source. There's no human oil in this at all. But because of the tzimtzum element, because it has been identified on this component, on the structural level, there is nothing here, it's just a structure. And it moves, so what's the difference how you use it? I just... I can't help myself but to point out how things develop in our world. Yes.
The point is that even with this local light, it remains connected to atzmi or.
Right.
But yet at the same time it enables it. In some cases, it gets hidden, like by the racetrack. I mean,
that's right.
You're saying, okay.
It would never have materialized were it not for the spirit, for the human spirit behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But then once it had occurred, so to speak, the stupidity had usurped its value. So, oh, no, I know how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to serve the human being at all.
Mm-hmm.
But doesn't a race, doesn't that also reflect a human spirit? People want to see, it's not the cars that they want to see, it's the drivers. They want to see the competition, the striving to win. That's a human element.
Striving to win what?
Doesn't matter.
No, it does matter. It does matter. What is the spirit that people want to win? If a person wants to build a business, something of value. What is this? Okay, Shmuel,
we don't understand.
Shmuel,
We're Jewish.
Shmuel,
But
Shmuel, please, I don't want to waste my time.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? Yes.
I was wondering. It seems a lot of innovation comes from a desire to be the first to innovate it.
Fine, but innovate what? All innovation is judged against the market. Is this going to sell? It's not going to sell if it has no functional value. And the functional value is of such that it can pay for the investment. Everybody knows that.
Seems like there's a value higher than the market, meaning race cars are very popular in the market.
So we're racing
But
horses.
But we're saying there's a value that goes beyond popularity, goes to the reality of the human condition.
In terms of numbers, how many race cars and how many transportation sedans are created yearly?
Okay, so alright, so even though the race car industry is massively successful, it doesn't indicate meaning or doesn't compare to the real purpose. Okay.
Nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
The minute the use of a car on the street ceases, there's not going to be race cars. Finished.
Mm-hmm.
This is only to give us a sense that it can go down to tzimzum and it can go down to mitzias, to a worldly state, and yet it retains its original spirit. This is the phenomenon of oil. All right, before we go into the next, we're going to interrupt here. Have a great day. Thank you all for the good brachas last night. I appreciate it. Kol tov.